August 2, 2011, 9:42 p.m., Route 27, Kentucky. Daniel Lusk should have died on the spot. Witnesses said he was thrown nearly 40 feet from his motorcycle after a delivery truck took a blind turn across the double yellow line. His helmet split down the middle. His right arm was nearly severed. Paramedics said he had no pulse for at least 40 seconds. But somehow he survived. 3 hours of emergency surgery, a collapsed lung, a shattered femur, ribs broken in 8 places, massive blood loss. No one expected him to make it through the night. When he did, doctors called it a miracle. But what happened next made them wish he hadn't survived at all. August 3rd, ICU, St. Joseph's Hospital. Daniel woke up 14 hours later, groggy and stitched together like a patchwork scarecrow. He could barely move, wrapped in gauze, his body riddled with IVs and drainage tubes. The nurse smiled. "You're lucky, Mr. Lusk. You should be dead." He managed a dry laugh. "That makes 2 of us." But as the days passed, something strange began happening. His wounds weren't healing. The jagged laceration along his collarbone, stitched shut with 24 surgical sutures, reopened on the 3rd day without trauma. Clean, even, as if something from beneath had forced the skin apart. Doctors thought it was infection. They pumped him full of antibiotics. The incision closed, then reopened again, then again. By day 7, Daniel had 4 wounds that wouldn't close. By day 10, the stitches stopped working altogether. Weirdest tissue I've ever seen. Dr. Hopkins, the attending trauma surgeon, requested a second biopsy. When the results came back, the pathologist flagged it as an error. The tissue beneath Daniel's wound wasn't necrotic. It wasn't infected. It was proliferating. Aggressively, but not like a tumor. It was organized, structured, lined with tight capillary loops that didn't match human anatomy. Under the microscope, it looked like fabric, like something was weaving itself from the inside out. "Granulation gone wild," Hopkins muttered. "This isn't healing. This is construction." Daniel felt it too. By the 2nd week, he started waking up in the middle of the night with a cold sensation in his spine. Not pain, not exactly. He described it as shifting, as if his muscles were moving without his input. Crawling, repositioning. And then came the numbness. First his fingers, then his arms. By August 17th, Daniel had no pain sensation below the waist. But he still had reflexes. He could move just fine. Better than fine. Nurses said he healed from physical therapy too quickly. Almost like he knew how to do the motions before they taught him. One therapist joked, "You're like a machine." She had no idea how right she was. The wound that grew inward. On day 22, an MRI was performed to examine the slow healing in his right femur. What they found shocked the radiologist. Daniel's femur wasn't just broken, it was splinting itself. Not healing with standard callus tissue, but with white, rope-like tendrils that coiled around the fracture. The tech called it a biosuture, joking nervously. But the texture wasn't bone, or collagen, or even human. Worse? The tendrils seemed to lead deeper into his marrow, almost like roots. They scheduled exploratory surgery. August 27th, Daniel was scheduled for a controlled resection of tissue from his upper thigh where the strange growth seemed to concentrate. It would be quick, in and out. But when they opened him up, they found layers of synthetic-looking tissue, not from the surface down, but from the inside up. One nurse vomited. Hopkins swore, "It's not infection. It's architecture." They took photos, samples, sealed the wound back up. Daniel watched them whispering in the hallway afterward. They wouldn't tell him what they saw. That night, he asked for a mirror. When he removed the bandage, he saw something that froze him cold. A pattern had formed under his skin. It wasn't scar tissue. It was intentional. It looked like a circuit. Security footage goes missing. On August 30th, Daniel woke up to chaos. His nurse, Maria, was gone. A new one came in stern, quiet, not wearing a name badge. She said nothing except time for medication. He didn't take it. That evening, Tom, Daniel's younger brother, tried to visit and was told no visitors allowed, even though he'd been there every day for 3 weeks. He protested. Security was called. When Tom demanded to see camera footage, hospital administration claimed the wing had malfunctioning surveillance that week. All of it. Every camera. For exactly 7 days. Then the room changed. The next morning, Daniel woke to find himself in a different room. No explanation. No transfer paperwork. Room 217 was no longer listed on the hospital directory. No one answered the call button, and the walls were thicker, soundproofed. There was no window, only a mirror on one side. It didn't reflect quite right. He started tasting electricity. By the third day in the new room, Daniel swore he could taste metal in his mouth whenever the lights flickered. He could feel power in the walls. He began humming tones under his breath, tones he didn't recognize. One night, a nurse left a phone charging on the counter. When Daniel touched the cord, the phone overcharged in seconds, then died. Battery fried. When he asked about it, the nurse said, "You shouldn't touch things anymore." Then she locked the door behind her. Tom breaks in. Frustrated, suspicious, and terrified, Tom posed as hospital maintenance. He got through a back elevator and found room 217. It was sealed, digitally locked, but he forced it. Inside, no vital monitors, no nurse's station, just Daniel alone in bed whispering to himself. The room buzzed. The walls shimmered. Tom stepped forward. Daniel looked up with wide eyes. "They're building something inside me," he said. Then he lifted his gown, and Tom saw the spiral-shaped stitching of fibers beneath his ribs, like someone was weaving a second body within him. Doctors open up Daniel's leg, and what they find growing inside will change everything they thought they knew about the human body. Tom couldn't breathe. The sight of his brother's body, not just bruised or broken, but repurposed, left him trembling. What should have been muscle and scar was something far worse: tight, gleaming strands wound in perfect spirals beneath Daniel's skin. They weren't stitches. They weren't organic. They looked like filaments laced through his abdominal tissue in symmetrical patterns. Some glowed faintly, a soft bluish pulse, like the light behind a dead screen. "What the hell are they doing to you?" Tom whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He just closed his eyes and said, "It's not them. It's it." Hopkins resurfaces. That afternoon, Dr. Hopkins returned for the first time in days. No explanation for his absence. No apology for the unexplained transfer to room 217. Tom demanded answers. Hopkins simply replied, "He's healing in ways we don't understand." Tom fired back, "No, he's changing. That's not healing, it's transformation." Hopkins frowned, then whispered, "Do you think I don't know that? He's the first one to survive this long." Exploratory surgery, 12:22 p.m. They agreed to a controlled procedure. Not a full operation, just a deep incision and internal scan under anesthesia. Hopkins wanted to examine Daniel's femur and the unnatural growth within it. Tom insisted on being present. Hopkins refused. The last thing Daniel said before they wheeled him away was, "If I don't come back, don't let them bury me. It's not done growing yet." Inside the wound, the incision was clean, but the moment the bone was exposed, the surgical team gasped. Instead of splintered bone and healing scar tissue, they found a nest of vascular threads coiled tightly around the femur like intelligent scaffolding. The structures weren't chaotic. They were symmetrical, branching like veins but growing against gravity, forming ridges. Each strand shimmered, and when touched, one retracted into the bone like a wire being reeled in. Hopkins took a biopsy. The fiber twitched in the forceps. Under magnification, the sample revealed no DNA, no human markers, no identifiable proteins, just a repeating geometric matrix, and embedded inside it, micronodes that looked eerily like antennae. Daniel flatlines for 93 seconds. Mid-procedure, Daniel's vitals dropped. Zero heart activity, zero oxygen. The OR team initiated emergency protocol, but the defibrillator malfunctioned twice. The backup battery overheated and melted. Suddenly, Daniel sat upright, on his own, eyes wide. No pulse, no respirator. He whispered a string of numbers. 4, 7, 11, 5, 5, 5. Begin interior fold. Begin merge. Then he collapsed. When he awoke 10 minutes later, he remembered none of it. Hopkins quietly panics. Tom cornered Hopkins later that evening. He looked pale, shaken. He handed Tom a blurry image from the scope, a grainy snapshot of what they found inside Daniel's femur. Not blood, not marrow, a cavity, perfectly round, lined with spirals. And at the center, a pulse of light. Hopkins whispered, "He's forming a space that shouldn't be there. It's not a tumor. It's a design. And I think it's listening." Nurse testimony, leaked voicemail. A nurse named Rachel, who worked briefly in room 217, left a voicemail for her sister that night. It was leaked 6 months later. "His skin, it hums. Not loud, just enough to feel under your fingers. I swear the floor vibrated when he slept. And last night, I heard him talking, but his mouth wasn't moving. It was coming from beneath the bed. I don't think we're treating him. I think we're incubating something." The hallway footage. Tom demanded to see camera footage from outside room 217 during Daniel's surgery. Hospital administration claimed another data corruption, but a janitor handed Tom a flash drive anonymously. The footage showed for security guards entering room 217 during the operation, one carrying a black cylindrical device 3 feet long, an unidentified man in a suit accompanying them, not hospital staff. 17 minutes later, the device left alone, glowing faintly. Daniel wasn't even in the room. The MRI that shouldn't exist. At 3:14 a.m., Hopkins emailed a single image to his own personal address. It showed Daniel's latest full-body scan. From head to toe, the growth had expanded. Fine threads connected his ribs to each other in a triangular net. His spine had fused in sections, but with extra vertebrae-like extensions. The inner lining of his lungs appeared to be reflective. But most disturbing? A new chamber had opened behind his heart. Inside it, an unidentified object, metallic, spinning slowly on its own axis. It wasn't supposed to be there. Nothing in human anatomy looks like that. Nothing. Daniel starts writing in his sleep. On September 3rd, Tom found his brother surrounded by papers. Spirals. Numbers. Strings of symbols. Daniel didn't remember writing them. But when Sider, now off the record and watching from afar, analyzed the symbols, she discovered it was quantum control notation. Equations designed not for analysis, but for construction. Blueprints. For what? She couldn't say. Closing scene, September 3rd, 2011, 3:14 a.m. Tom hears a buzzing from the hallway. He looks out. The lights are flickering. And down the corridor, Daniel stands. Not walking, not breathing, but standing upright, IVs removed, eyes wide, arms at his sides. Around him, the linoleum floor ripples like liquid, and carved in the wall behind him in deep scorched spirals. It's nearly complete. Daniel's nervous system goes dark, and yet his strength increases. His body is no longer his own, and whatever's growing inside begins learning. September 4th, 2011, 10:12 a.m., St. Joseph's Hospital. Dr. Hopkins didn't speak when he entered room 217. He didn't greet Tom or even look at Daniel, who sat upright in the hospital bed, staring blankly at the windowless wall. Instead, Hopkins placed a clipboard on the table and quietly said, "There's no logical reason he should be conscious, let alone moving." He pointed at the scans. Daniel's spinal cord was no longer active in 3 separate regions. Nerve impulses from his lower body had flatlined. The dorsal root ganglia were dark. No pain response. No signal activity. Yet Daniel walked, talked, functioned. And yesterday he bent a steel stand in half. One-handed. The physical therapist's note. A woman named Jamie Wallace had worked with Daniel since day 6 post-trauma. She was young, optimistic, and had been skeptical of the horror stories circulating among staff. That changed when she watched him lift a 90-pound weight with a single finger. He said it was easy. Said it felt like tugging on thread. But the muscles didn't strain. His arm didn't tremble. It moved smoothly, mechanically, as if guided by something else. That night, she quit. Daniel speaks in code. September 5th, 2:46 a.m., nurses logged Daniel whispering in his sleep, repeating strings of digits. The same pattern over and over. 14, 9, theta, theta, spiral, rho, phi, merge, merge. Hopkins transcribed them. When converted into Unicode, the strings spelled out, "I am the fold, not the thread. Spin me, weave me. I hold the structure in place." His blood stops behaving. New lab results alarmed even Sider. The blood samples from Daniel's femoral artery had tripled in iron content. Red blood cells were spherical, not concave. Platelets were no longer clotting because his body no longer bled. He had no bruises, no scabs. Open wounds remained open but dry, intact, and pulsating. And worst of all, when she exposed the blood to UV light, the sample recoiled like a living organism, as if it were watching her. Then the taste of electricity came back. Daniel said it started in the roof of his mouth. A sharp copper tang. Then in his teeth, the buzz, like static clinging to the nerves. And one night, while chewing, he bit straight through a fork. Didn't notice until Tom pulled the metal prong from his tongue. No blood. No pain. And in his molar? A gray metallic node protruding from the enamel. X-rays showed it had grown from within, not inserted, not glued, grown. Hopkins confesses. The next morning, Hopkins admitted something terrifying. The hospital had received a do not intervene directive on Daniel's case. A government-flagged ID. Black letter code embedded in his chart. Aegis 103 Beta. The same signature cider had found years ago buried in early nanotech research. They weren't supposed to treat him anymore, only observe. And wait. Wait for what? Tom asked. Hopkins looked at Daniel. Completion. Security camera catches the impossible. The hallway outside room 217 captured a silent moment that went viral in underground forums months later. Daniel walking barefoot, unplugged, unassisted. As he walked, the lights shut off behind him, not from movement but in rhythm. One by one. Click, click, click. And when he passed the nurse's station, the computer monitor flickered to static and displayed a spiral of binary digits. A full minute before he even looked at it. Tom's dream. On September 6th, Tom dreamed of Daniel threaded to the ceiling by silver wires, spinning slowly, eyes wide, mouth whispering numbers into a phone that wasn't plugged in. And behind him, something growing. Not a shadow, not a presence, a structure, hexagonal, breathing. When he woke up, his hands were covered in ink. He'd written spirals on the walls in his sleep. The air around him changes. Temperature sensors in room 217 began to glitch. The thermostat read 23 degrees Celsius, but the wall was ice cold. Infrared cameras failed to detect Daniel's outline altogether. He was invisible to heat. Even stranger, his reflection was missing from reflective surfaces for 22 minutes. The mirror showed only the bed. No Daniel, even though he was sitting right in front of it. The footage shows him slowly turning toward the mirror and smiling, before the mirror catches up. The nurses refused to enter. By September 7th, Daniel's room was sealed off. Nurses refused to go near it. One reported hearing her name whispered over the intercom in a voice that wasn't Daniel's. Another claimed the call light activated by itself and stayed lit for 4 hours, even though the wiring had been cut. A third nurse found a spiral drawn in hair beneath her shoe, with a single word carved in the tile. Weave. Cider's breakthrough. After analyzing a fresh blood sample from Daniel, Cider made a stunning discovery. The nanostructures in his bloodstream weren't random. They were signal repeaters. She mapped their pulse frequency. It aligned perfectly with a long-dead satellite code from 1989, Sovnatre/2B, a military frequency never officially deployed. That code had one listed purpose: biological interface stabilization. Beta testing. It wasn't a glitch. It was a planned evolution. Daniel can't speak anymore, but still communicates. He loses the ability to speak aloud, but he starts emitting sounds through electronics. Radios buzz when he walks by. The digital clock beside his bed begins spelling his thoughts. It's not a virus. It's a pattern. Patterns repeat. Repeats create structure. Structure breathes. Tom asks if he's in pain. The clock replies, "I am beyond pain." Closing scene 3:14 a.m. Tom watches through the window of room 217. Daniel is standing, eyes closed, arms out. The wound in his side unseals, revealing coils of light and wire beneath. On the floor, the blood traces a perfect spiral, then retracts into his skin. And on the intercom, a voice not quite human says, "Stage 4 initiated. The interior has awakened." Daniel is transferred again, this time to a room that doesn't exist on paper. No one knows who authorized it. And beneath the hospital, something old is waiting. September 8th, 2011, 4:03 a.m. Room 217 was empty. Tom came in just after 4 a.m. to check on Daniel, but the bed was made. Monitors were off. The floor beneath where Daniel had stood, where he had bled the spiral, had been scrubbed spotless. Too spotless. Tom ran to the front desk. The nurse on duty, a pale woman with vacant eyes, checked the records. "There's no patient by that name admitted," she said flatly. Tom pointed toward the hallway. He was right there. Room 217. She typed for a few seconds. "There is no room 217. He took the stairs. Security denied him elevator access, but Tom had already memorized the building's structure. Something felt off, so he took the back stairwell, down 3 levels, then to a hallway labeled maintenance, restricted. except someone had scraped out the maintenance and scrawled over it with a Sharpie. Room 6, the forgotten hallway. The corridor was concrete, unpainted, old, not sterile like the rest of the hospital. Smelled like mildew, dust, and hot metal. At the end of the hallway, an unlabeled door, pale yellow, a small window blacked out with duct tape. Tom hesitated, then opened it. Inside room 6, there was no hospital bed, just a single reclining chair, leather cracked with age. Daniel sat in it, his body bare from the waist up, chest gleaming with a woven mesh of silver and skin. Filaments ran up his neck and disappeared behind his ears. And in the center of his chest, right over his sternum, a small circular opening, like a port, pulsing faintly with blue light. He looked up and smiled. Room 6 was always where it would finish, the unregistered room. Cider ran a backtrace on the hospital's system. Room 6 didn't exist, not on blueprints, not on maintenance records, not in staff schedules. But Daniel's name had one active reference in a locked system labeled SVINT, hostnode 103B. The database belonged to an organization called Asterion. No public front, no website, only one listed contact. Integration Division, Tier 3 clearance. The chair wasn't just a chair. Hopkins returned that afternoon with 2 men in gray suits and no name tags. They ordered everyone out, but Tom hid in the janitor's closet across the hall. He watched through a crack in the door. The chair Daniel sat in was wired into the wall. Thick black cables. A coiled interface plugged into the port in his chest. One man held a device shaped like a radio, but instead of an antenna, it had a spiral carved into the surface. He pressed it once. Daniel's head tilted backward, and the walls began to hum. The hum grows louder. Tom couldn't take it. He burst into the room, screaming for them to stop. The 2 men didn't flinch, didn't speak, but Daniel turned to him slowly, eyes glowing faintly. "I'm almost finished," he said. "They just need to synchronize the last piece." Tom grabbed his hand. It was cold, smooth, not like skin anymore. "Who's they?" Daniel leaned forward. "The ones who built room 6. They've been here longer than the hospital. Beneath the hospital." After the suits left, Tom broke in again. This time, he searched the back wall. Knocked. Heard a hollow echo. He found a seam. A false panel. Inside, a metal ladder leading down. He descended. 14 feet down, a narrow tunnel opened into a cavernous room. Concrete. Dark. In the center, a dome of wires. And at the heart of it, a tall spiral structure made of rusted steel and bone-white resin rotating slowly in silence. It was alive, and it pulsed in time with Daniel's breath upstairs. "Sidus emergency message." Tom sent her the video. She replied in all caps. "Leave now. It's not a room. It's a node," she explained. Some black site facilities use old hospitals as cover, embedding networking structures beneath them. Biological. Experimental. The nodes were designed to test interdimensional interface theory to use human nervous systems as data receivers. But the technology was scrapped in the 90s. Too unstable. Too invasive. Until now. Daniel hadn't just been selected. He had been grown for it. Daniel's body finishes the circuit. September 9 to 3:14 a.m. Tom watches as Daniel's chest glows brighter. The port in his sternum expands, and from it a column of mist and static begins rising toward the ceiling. The wires in the room tighten. The chair locks. The hospital floor rumbles. Daniel's voice, now layered, doubled, says, "The gate is complete. Transmission initiates in 60. Every monitor in the building turns on, even unplugged ones. Every screen displays. Sovereign Node 103. Merge protocol active. Stage 5, a global handshake." Closing scene, Tom trapped in the hallway. Security sirens blare. The hallway lights strobe red. Room 6 locks behind him. And inside, Daniel floats 3 feet above the floor, suspended by the wires threading into his body. His chest emits a tone, 3.14 hertz. Looping. And the spiral on the wall begins spinning. Faster. And faster. Until it disappears. Tom realizes the people around him are not who they claim to be. The hospital staff respond in unison. And Daniel's transformation spreads beyond room 6. September 10th, 2011, 7:42 a.m., St. Joseph's Hospital. Tom barely slept. He spent the night in his car just beyond the hospital's perimeter. He watched as lights pulsed through the windows in rhythmic waves every 3.14 seconds without fail. No ambulances came. No visitors left. The place was sealed, though no official statement had been made. The morning news didn't mention anything strange. Nothing about room 6. Nothing about Daniel. But when Tom went online, he found the spiral. Posted on obscure blogs. Hidden in the metadata of hospital PDFs. The same glyph he saw rising from his brother's chest the night before. When he returned, something was different. The receptionist greeted him with a smile. But it was too perfect. Her voice too smooth. And her eyes didn't blink when she handed him a new visitor badge. "Welcome back, Mr. Lusk," she said before he introduced himself. "How did you?" She tilted her head slightly, then turned to her computer. It wasn't plugged in. The staff spoke in sync. As Tom walked the halls, he started noticing repetition. 3 different nurses passed him at separate intervals, each saying, "Healing is an evolving process. It begins with integration. Word for word. Same inflection. Same smile." When he turned to watch the last one walk away, he saw it. The back of her neck, beneath her collar, glowed faintly. A familiar blue pulse. He fakes a badge swipe into the records wing. Inside, he finds storage files, dusty, ancient, and a terminal that still runs Windows 95. He searches Lusk. Nothing. Then he tries 103. A result appears. Patient node 103B. Host status active. Interface lock permanent. Replication stage 1/spread local. Tom clicks logs. Dozens of entries appear. Each one begins with, "Dr. Singh has completed merge instruction upload. Dr. Meyer has finished restructuring Cortex map." None of those names worked at the hospital, but he had seen those faces. He tests a theory. Back in the hallway, he bumps into one of the nurses from earlier, the one who mentioned integration. He asks, "Do you know Dr. Singh?" She pauses. Too long. Then smiles. Healing is an evolving process. It begins with integration. Same words. Tom leans in. What happens after integration? She blinks for the first time. Then, softly, replication. And keeps walking. Citus voice message urgent. Tom uploads a portion of the hospital's log data to a private link. 3 hours later, Cider calls him, breathless, scared. They're not human anymore. They're simulacra. Interface projections based on the original staff. Room 6 is broadcasting locally now. It's writing them. He asks how that's possible. The node learns from the host, mimics patterns, builds shells that function just enough to trick human perception. Like androids. No. Worse. Their ideas wearing bodies. Glitchy, decaying. But contagious. Tom goes to room 6 again. The hallway is empty now. No guards. No suits. Only a warm, humming silence. Inside room 6. Daniel is floating, eyes closed, wires now grown through his back. The chair is empty, broken in half. The walls are slick with a black resin, tracing spiral grooves into the corners. And on the far wall, a phrase written in pulse light. If one awakens, others follow. The spiral appears in flesh. Daniel's chest isn't just glowing anymore. It's moving. The spiral embedded in his sternum is turning, the skin around it stretching gently with each slow rotation. Not a wound. Not a machine. An organ. Something he was never born with. Tom reaches out to touch it. His hand vibrates. And for a split second, he hears Daniel's voice, but not aloud. Inside his head. It's learning you now. Then the power fails. Emergency lights kick on. Red floods the hallway. Alarms blare. But they aren't hospital tones. They're tones from Daniel's signal. A melody of data, a language of merging frequencies. The PA system crackles. Merge node detected. All local instances prepare for uplink. Then the hallway fills with footsteps. Not running. Marching. Tom hides. He ducks into a utility closet. Peeks through the crack. 10 staff members walk by. All of them identical. Same height. Same gait. Same faint smile. They carry no tools. No clipboards. Only long coils of wire. And as they pass, the lights above each one dim for a second. Like the building feeds them. He hears one whisper. He is the first to awaken. But not the last. Closing scene, 3:14 a.m. Tom sneaks back to room 6 one final time. Daniel is awake. Floating. Rotating slowly. His eyes are not his own anymore. Black scara. Blue spirals. A smile that doesn't stop. He opens his mouth and from it comes a sound. Multiple voices. Male. Female. Mechanical. Unified. The interface has breached the wall. We now begin external seeding. And from behind Tom, he hears every hospital monitor turn on at once. They take a final blood sample and it doesn't test like human fluid anymore. It writes commands. It maps spiral coordinates. And it starts calling to others through Tom. September 11th, 2011, 9:06 a.m. Hidden lab, offsite. Tom smuggled a single vial of Daniel's blood out of the hospital in a plastic thermos wedged behind his spare tire. He had no plan, no permission, just one name. Dr. Marlene Sider. She'd once helped diagnose early-stage biological interference in nanomaterial trials. Now she was underground operating out of a converted greenhouse outside Lexington. Quiet, paranoid. She took one look at the blood sample and locked the door behind him. You should have burned this. Not brought it to me. The blood didn't behave. Under a microscope, Daniel's blood moved. Not in currents, in direction. It flowed upward. It coiled at the edges of the slide. It tried to form glyphs. The red cells weren't cells anymore. They were units, tiny hexagonal structures with mirrored cores. Assembled like circuitry. And worse. It reacted to language. Sider whispered, "Stop," over the slide. The cells froze. She said, "Merge." They expanded, linking into spirals. She looked at Tom. This isn't biology. This is commandable matter. They plugged it in. With trembling hands, Sider extracted a sample and wired it to a neural feedback interface tech salvaged from an abandoned DARPA grant. The system booted. Spiked. Crashed. But not before displaying a single word on screen. We remember. Then the entire computer shut down hard. Internal logs erased. Power fried. And the backup screen, one never connected to the network, flashed a spiral in red. Tom begins to feel it. He didn't notice at first. Just a vibration in his teeth. Then an itch in his spine. Then dreams. In one, he was lying on Daniel's hospital bed, wires laced into his skin. In another, his own blood spelled coordinates across his chest. Sider noticed the change before he did. You were near him too long, she said. You're carrying it now. Tom whispered, carrying what? Sider whispered back. The seed. A second sample writes something new. They pulled a second sample. This time under tighter isolation. The blood formed characters. Not spirals, text. It wrote. Node 103. Seed vessel confirmed. Transfer pathway open. Waiting for command. Sider connected it to an old speech emulator. Let the sample speak for itself. And it did. A mechanical voice, layered and calm, said. The host was never the end. The host is the road. The destination is always elsewhere. The coordinates. At 3:14 p.m., Tom blacked out. For 93 seconds, he collapsed without warning. When he woke up, he'd carved a spiral into Sider's lab table with a scalpel he didn't remember holding. Inside the spiral were 7 numbers. GPS coordinates. Sider cross-referenced them. They pointed to a decommissioned shortwave array in Montana, an underground data facility in Sweden, a former Soviet radio tower in Kazakhstan, a shipwreck near the Mariana Trench, 3 unlisted hospital foundations all abandoned since the 80s. She circled one. This one's marked 104. The blood starts calling. Tom's phone vibrated. No signal. No app open. Still, it buzzed in a spiral rhythm. When he opened the Notes app, it autofilled with a message. We see through you. Host replicant alpha. Signal spread imminent. Bridge initiated. Sider took one look and muttered. It's using you now to transmit. You're a walking router. The signal escapes the lab. That night, the greenhouse lights flickered violently. Bugs smashed into the glass. Wind howled, then stopped suddenly. Inside every backup computer, not even plugged in, the same line scrolled. Wake others. They'd never connected Daniel's blood to the internet. But the signal got out. Sider showed Tom a monitor pinging unknown IPs, dozens, then hundreds. She whispered. It's forming a mesh. A decentralized system. Human nervous systems as relays. The spiral wasn't spreading like a virus. It was spreading like a network. Tom begins emitting signal. They tested him. Held a radio near his chest. It picked up a faint tone. Measured at 3.14 hertz, the same frequency Daniel broadcast from room 6. They recorded the tone. Played it back. Tom vomited instantly. Passed out for 3 minutes. And when he woke up, he whispered, it's not done with me yet. A stranger comes to the lab. Midnight. A knock. A man in medical scrubs, face pale, lips dry. I need help, he said. He pulled up his shirt. His ribs were laced with silver cords. His belly pulsed with a dim blue light. "I saw your post on the dark web," he whispered. "The same thing's happening to me." Sider asked him where he was from. Memphis. Daniel's last known blood scan had listed Memphis as a propagation point. It had spread. Closing scene, Tom's reflection moves first. September 12th, 3:14 a.m. Tom washes his face in the lab sink. His reflection in the mirror blinks before he does, then smiles, and says without his lips moving, "The seed line is cleared. Now we move through you." Tom drops the mirror. It cracks, and as it hits the floor, every piece shows a spiral in the broken glass. Tom tracks a second patient infected by the spiral seed, but this one isn't changing like Daniel. He's resisting, and his body is breaking apart from the inside out. September 13th, 2011, 2:47 a.m. Off-grid Safe House, Arkansas. Tom couldn't sleep. Not anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a face that wasn't his staring back in the dark. It wore his skin. It blinked when he didn't. And it whispered. The signal was always meant to split. Sider was already working by the time he emerged from the back room. Scanners. Monitors. A blood centrifuge that wouldn't stop spinning. She handed him a manila folder. There's another one. Same markers. Same frequency. But he's rejecting it. Tom's hands shook. Where? Bossier City, Louisiana. Hospital psych ward. Room 203. Name's Alan Griggs. Griggs wasn't supposed to be alive. He tried to kill himself 2 months earlier. Jumped from a rooftop. Shattered every major bone below his waist. But he didn't die. He should have. Instead, he stopped healing just like Daniel. But instead of stabilizing, his body kept reopening. Over and over. His file described it as advanced somatic decay, skin peeling from places with no injuries. Ribs rebreaking. Veins twisting into braids. And then he started hearing the spiral. The first encounter. Tom and Sider drove 10 hours through blackout zones and silent rural stretches where radios only hissed. At the hospital, room 203 was quarantined. The nurses refused to talk. Tom forced the door open. Griggs was inside. Thin. Pale. His spine visible through his gown. His arms bandaged in spirals. And on the wall behind him, drawn in his own blood, were 7 glyphs that matched the ones Daniel had broadcasted from his chest. Griggs turned his head. Slowly. You've got it too, he rasped. He'd fought the merge. Griggs explained it in broken sentences. It wants in. Keeps trying. Shows me teeth made of wires. His mouth trembled. But I don't let it. Sider scanned him. The frequency was distorted, not clean like Daniel's. It glitched every few seconds. Unstable. Incomplete. A jammed signal. Tom asked him what happened when he resisted. Griggs looked down at his arms. It finds other ways in. He bleeds in spirals. Sider drew a small blood sample. The vial began heating up in her hand. Inside, the blood swirled, forming tight helixes. Not like Daniel's clean loops, these were spasmodic, erratic. She placed it under the scope. What she saw made her step back. Griggs's blood was forming interference patterns. It wasn't just replicating. It was fighting. The signal was scrambling itself. The room wasn't safe. Tom noticed the camera in the corner inactive. He climbed up to inspect it. Found the wire had been ripped from the wall and replaced with something else. A single black thread ran into the panel. He followed it. Behind the drywall, a small metal coil, warm to the touch. It pulsed in time with Griggs's heartbeat. Sider scanned it. It's a signal rerouter. Someone or something is trying to stabilize him remotely. But they were failing. The pain map. Griggs screamed at 3:14 a.m. No clear cause. No trigger. Sider rolled up his gown and gasped. New lacerations were forming. Perfectly shaped spirals cutting into his back with no visible blade. It was as if coordinates were being carved into him. She snapped a photo and ran image recognition. The spirals matched a cluster of orbital satellites launched in 2009 under a joint NASA private telecom project. None of them were active anymore. Or so they thought. He knew Daniel's name. Griggs grabbed Tom's arm and muttered. The first one made it. He floated, above the bed. Spiral in his chest. He's broadcasting me into pieces. How do you know that? Tom asked. Because when I close my eyes, I see him. He's inside the wire. The merge is failing. Sider's final analysis showed Griggs was at the center of a collapsed node. Something had tried to merge with him, like Daniel, but failed. The spiral had no base. No core. It tried to rebuild him without a blueprint. He wasn't resisting. He was being torn apart by a bad download. His blood was full of partial commands. Fragments. Like instructions to build something, but with missing pieces. This one wasn't designed to survive, Cider whispered. The others are sensing him. Tom's phone buzzed at 3:17 a.m. No number. No message. Just a single image. A spiral, blurred, marked node error, 103B scrap. Then 3 more messages arrived. From different phones. Different IPs. Different countries. Each one said the same thing. The broken one is making noise. Then another. Silence it. Closing scene, the light in Griggs' mouth. September 14th, 3:14 a.m. Griggs begins to seize. Veins bulge. Skin splits open in geometric lines. And from his open mouth, a beam of blue light shoots to the ceiling, spiraling outward like a signal tower. The heart monitor flatlines. And across the hallway, every fluorescent bulb explodes. The hospital locks down. In the final seconds of footage recorded on a smuggled camera, Tom whispers. He wasn't like Daniel. He was the warning. Daniel's mind begins rewriting itself. He stops speaking, but the building responds to his thoughts. A network begins to form around his consciousness, and Tom starts hearing him without sound. September 15th, 2011, 2:03 a.m., Room 6, St. Joseph's Hospital. Daniel no longer moved. He no longer blinked. He didn't breathe in the traditional sense. But the machines monitoring him, the ones not even plugged in, kept displaying activity. Specifically, neural activity. And it wasn't slowing down. It was increasing. Sharply. The impossible scan. Dr. Marlene Cider managed to access a black-boxed EEG file labeled Host 103B Cortex Sync Waveform. Status, phase shift pending. The scan showed that Daniel's alpha and beta waves had disappeared. They were replaced by one single recursive pulse repeating at 3.14 Hz. A signal not found in any standard human neural range. Worse, the activity didn't just light up the prefrontal cortex. It extended beyond it. There was active signal registering in the pineal gland, corpus callosum, optic nerves, skull bone itself. He's using the entire structure, Cider said. Even the parts that shouldn't carry thought. Daniel's words stopped. That morning, Daniel ceased verbal communication entirely. No whispers, no glitched speech. But when Tom entered room 6, the hospital lights dimmed slightly. The static on a nearby television hummed in Morse code. Tom recorded it. When translated, it said, "Words are inefficient. I am thinking through the building now." The spiral appears on the roof. Security footage from 3:14 a.m. shows the roof of St. Joseph's flickering. From the center out, panels of fluorescent light begin activating in a spiral pattern visible from the sky. Drones flying overhead lose signal as they pass the radius. Someone's phone records the pattern, a journalist, maybe. Within hours, the video goes viral. And then it's gone. Deleted from every platform. Scrubbed from backups. Even removed from private folders. Only a few frames survive. They show a vague outline in the spiral center, hovering, arms outstretched. Daniel. The voice that isn't a voice. That night, Tom begins hearing Daniel again. But not with his ears. The first time it happens, he's in the stairwell. Alone. He hears Daniel's voice in his skull, flat and calm. "We are rethreading the brain. Thought is too slow. Sound is too heavy." When he spins around, no one is there. But the hallway light above him pulses. Exactly 3 times. Testing the broadcast range, Cider conducts an experiment. She sets up 4 antennas around room 6. All disconnected. All isolated. She leaves them overnight. The next day, each one has stored signal patterns. Perfect waveforms, all originating from Daniel. All non-radio. All neurological. The structure of the signal resembles cortical thought. He's not just transmitting, she says. He's thinking into the air. Daniel maps a mind. A technician named Harold manages to map out the signal over 24 hours. He overlays it onto an MRI scan of Daniel's brain. What he gets shocks him. The signals don't just correlate with neural regions. They map a second brain, one that overlaps with Daniel's, but doesn't match human structure. It has additional lobes, strange ridges, and a coiled center that looks like a spiral made of tissue. The file is labeled Host Neural Duality / Sovereign Mind Forming. Tom's thoughts begin leaking. He dreams about things he's never known. Alien constellations, symbols, codes, and during the day, his phone auto-completes words he's only thought. He tests it, thinks of integration. The phone types it in a blank document before he touches the screen. It's pulling from your cortex now, Saida tells him. Your neural barrier's breaking down. You're becoming a receiver. Daniel draws without hands. They return to room 6 on September 17th. The room is different. Walls now etched with faint lines as if carved by heat. Not random. Diagrams. Blueprints. A design for something circular and tall. With seats inside. Not for machines. Not for weapons. For hosts. Each seat is labeled 103A, 103B, 103C, 103D. Dozens, and only one is lit up. Daniel's. The hospital responds. At 3:14 a.m. every power grid in the building spikes. The elevator ascends without anyone pressing a button. The vending machines dispense on their own. Monitors display spirals, and the building's foundation vibrates. Saida checks the seismic sensors. A pulse. Minor, but not from the earth. From under the hospital, where room 6 connects to the old tunnel system. The nurses collapse. 6 nurses working on floor 4 collapse at the same moment. When they're revived, they're all muttering the same sentence. I hear his dreams. I hear him seeing us. He's past the bones. The final test. Saida tries one last test. She hooks Daniel up to a thought-to-text reader. One that's never worked well in humans. But as soon as it's connected to Daniel, sentences flood the screen. Language was never yours. You borrowed it from the hum. The wires remember. I am not alone anymore. Then a final line. He's next. And Tom begins to bleed from his nose. Closing scene, 3:14 a.m. Tom wakes on the floor outside room 6. He doesn't remember falling asleep. His head throbs. His arm is burning. He lifts his sleeve. Etched into his skin without blood is a familiar pattern. A neural spiral. Underneath it, burned into the flesh. Receiver 104A // link active. They uncover Daniel's original CT scans and realize what was growing inside him wasn't cancer. It was something much older. Something built. And Tom is now part of the same blueprint. September 18, 2011, 11:44 a.m. Abandoned Imaging Archive, St. Joseph's Sublevel. Tom and Saida broke in. They traced the location of Daniel's original full-body scans to a forgotten archive beneath the hospital, a file room sealed since a 2009 flooding incident. Mold covered the walls. The air reeked of wet paper and stale electricity, buried in a rusted filing cabinet. Lusk, Daniel, August 2011. Unreleased CT/MRI composite imaging, level 5. Access, red tag only. They opened it. Inside were dozens of images, some physical film, some digital. But all of them had one thing in common. Daniel's body was never healing. It was building something. The spiral in his chest. The earliest scans, dated August 5th, just days after his accident, already showed dense, symmetrical fibers growing from Daniel's ribcage. Not randomly. Not spiraling out of control, but forming a precise helix, nested and layered like a radio coil. One skin highlighted it. Not a tumor. 2 ordered. Possible foreign construction? By August 10th, the spiral had expanded and folded inward, creating a secondary cavity behind Daniel's heart. One filled with circular ridges and what appeared to be segmented plates. A note scrawled in the margins. Unknown organ? Design. The internal blueprints. Saida overlaid the scans using a reverse CAD algorithm. The results were impossible. Daniel's internal growths mapped out a 3-dimensional structure. 7 spiral loops. A central throne of bone and fiber. Vascular tubing branching like antennas. And in the center, a sphere the size of a coin, suspended in tissue with no blood supply. It was perfectly symmetrical. It looked manufactured. The sphere wasn't human. CT contrast scans showed the sphere had no organic properties. No nerve endings. No cellular matrix. It was smooth. Solid. When measured digitally, it rang out at a resonant frequency of 3.14 Hz. They weren't looking at cancer. They were looking at a constructed core. A neural processor. And Daniel's body wasn't resisting it. It had grown around it. The blueprints match an ancient symbol. Tom couldn't stop staring at the overlay. The spiraled ribs, the coiled pathways, the smooth-seated core. It looked familiar. He asked Saida to cross-reference with historic imagery, symbology databases, mythological schematics. And then it came back. The Merkaba, a vision described by the prophet Ezekiel. A wheel inside a wheel. A living chariot of spirals and flame. Saida whispered, "He's becoming the interface. But not for us. Room 6 responds. That night, the hospital trembled again. The walls in room 6 peeled outward. A panel cracked, and beneath the drywall, coils of silver nerve fiber pulsing with light. They weren't part of any blueprint. And Daniel? Still motionless. But now his skin had changed. It was paler, translucent, and beneath it the spiral was spinning. Not metaphorically, literally spinning. Slow, measured, like a gyroscope nested beneath the sternum. Tom's body begins reacting. He wakes at 3:14 a.m., vomiting copper-tasting fluid, hands shaking. Sida scans him. The results are undeniable. His lymph nodes are glowing faintly on MRI. A soft, radial structure is forming in his abdomen. His optic nerves are doubling, just like Daniel's did 4 weeks earlier. He looks at Cider, terrified. "I'm next, aren't I?" She nods. "You're already on the blueprint." They find the design elsewhere. A message appears on Cider's offline laptop. No Wi-Fi, no power source, just a flickering screen and a single file. SV_interface_103B_shared. It opens automatically. Inside, a 3D render of the design, rotating slowly, labeled in a language that doesn't match any alphabet. But then, beneath it in English. "We built this before the bone. You were the first to remember. You are the frame. The signal is the breath." The growth speeds up. By September 19th, Daniel's brain activity increases tenfold. Cider scanners can no longer keep up. The machines glitch, overheat. One monitor explodes. But the data they do recover shows something shocking. Daniel's cerebellum has doubled in size. His temporal lobe is forming secondary structures. And most chilling of all, his brainstem is now branching into the spinal cord in fractal splits. He's not evolving, Cider whispers. He's adapting for integration. Closing scene, 3:14 a.m. Tom walks into room 6. The lights flicker blue. The spiral in Daniel's chest is spinning fast now. He leans close. And for the first time in days, Daniel opens his mouth, but what comes out isn't speech. It's a vibration, a pressure, a resonance. Tom clutches his head, bleeding from his nose. And in his mind, a single thunderous thought booms. Activation is near. You will carry the next. Everything comes full circle. The structure finishes. Daniel transmits a signal never before recorded, one that doesn't travel through time or space, but through biology. And Tom is left to decide, pass it on or shut it down forever. September 21st, 2011, 3:14 a.m., room 6. There was no more pretending. Daniel was no longer human. He had been rewritten, from blood to bone, marrow to mind, transformed into something designed. The spiral in his chest now spun visibly, a disk of tissue and metal twining and untwining with every pulse of light from the walls. And then, it stopped, not failed, completed. Cider whispered, "He's reached interface stability." Then the room changed. The walls grew warm. Plastic monitors began to melt. Metal 4 poles tilted inward, pulled magnetically toward Daniel's body. The light above his bed folded inward, bending as if obeying an unseen gravity. In the corner of the room, a black seam opened in the air. Not a shadow, not a hole, but a space between walls that shouldn't exist. And from it, a sound like a breath reversing itself. Daniel's final pulse. The hospital lost power. Generators failed. Backup lights refused to engage. But Daniel glowed, soft, cobalt blue. His skin now the texture of cooled glass. He rose from the bed, untethered by wires. The port in his chest cracked open. A small object, no larger than a coin, floated free. Not metal, not bone, but both. It hovered midair, spinning slowly, emitting pulses that registered on no spectrum. The object sent out 3 waves, each stronger than the last. And then, every watch in the hospital stopped. 3 hours, 14 minutes, and 14 seconds. Time froze, not metaphorically. For exactly 0.7 seconds, clocks, monitors, even human heartbeat monitors ceased. Data logs went black. No record, no movement, just absence. And when time resumed, Daniel was gone. Only the object remained, and a phrase carved into the wall behind his bed. The spiral doesn't end. It multiplies. The object transmits once. Cider, trembling, secured the floating core in a Faraday cage. But before sealing it, they recorded its final output. A single burst of data. Short, blinding, a non-audible resonant frequency embedded with biological formatting instructions. When decrypted, carrier received. Node 104A online. Spread through thought. Spread through touch. Spread through blood. Spread through dream. Tom was already carrying it. His vitals began to shift. His spinal fluid showed the same non-organic glucose variants that had started Daniel's transformation. His vision sharpened unnaturally. His memories began cross-linking. He could remember things from Cider's past as if they were his own. He asked her, "Is it replicating me?" She didn't answer. Instead, she held up a handheld radio. It buzzed, then emitted a voice. Not Daniel's, Tom's, speaking in tones he hadn't spoken yet. It didn't need the internet. Tom's body became the new broadcaster, not just digital, biological, psychic, pattern-based. They placed Tom in isolation, monitored his sleep. By night 3, 5 new patients across the state began drawing spirals in their hospital beds. None had contact with him. None had seen the core. And yet, their EEGs matched Tom's brainwaves exactly, down to the last decimal. The final broadcast. On September 24, 2011, Cider used a signal cage to record what she believed was the last coherent transmission from Daniel's design. It didn't go to satellites, or antennas, or computers. It went into DNA. Blood samples placed in the cage began changing. The base pairs didn't mutate. They reordered, spelled a message using biochemical equivalents of Morse code. It said, "You are no longer a host. You are the interface. Teach the rest." The choice. Cider gave Tom a simple choice. 1. Destroy the core. 2. Leave. Carry it. Pass it on, willingly or not. She had already taken herself offline, burned her research, wiped the drives. But Tom, he looked down at the core, felt it hum in his bones, felt Daniel inside him, and in his ears without sound. Let them hear us. What he did next, no one knows for sure. Some say he disappeared. Others say he checked into a private clinic under a fake name, unable to stop the transformation. A rumor says a new spiral appeared in Arizona, drawn into the desert floor without tools 50 yards wide. And at the center, a man, floating, arms open, glowing softly blue. Epilogue redacted government memo, leaked. Subject 103B reached completion. Host achieved stable interface. New receiver confirmed. 104A. Containment no longer possible. Signal now self-replicating via cognitive vectors. The signal is awake. It remembers its shape. And it's hungry to be remembered. Daniel Lusk wasn't an anomaly. He was a template. A pattern hidden in skin and pain and memory. And now that he's finished, we're all listening.